Hello and welcome to our broadcast. I am your host, Dr. James Simmons, board certified nurse practitioner and founder of Ask the NP. So as we get started with this very important and super awesome topic, as a reminder to you, the information provided during this event is for educational purposes only. If you have any questions regarding medical conditions or treatment plans, things like that, please consult your physician or primary care provider. All right, now that the official stuff is out of the way, let's get started. I am so excited. Hello, everyone. There we are. Now we're on camera. Now you can see us. I am so excited to be joined by a fellow nurse. This is great. Mona Garcia, registered nurse and certified diabetes educator at Providence Holy Cross Medical Center. Mona, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you as well. And this is such an important topic for so many reasons. I mean, diabetes impacts so many individuals, but in particular, communities of color. And so for those of you who are watching, we appreciate you being here. And please don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, doesn't matter. Go ahead and drop some comments in the comment section below, or if you have questions for Mona or even me, we'll get to those throughout this little mini broadcast session during your lunch. But I want folks to also remember too, when we say the word BIPOC, which we will probably use frequently throughout this conversation, it's kind of a catch-all. Like it or not, it's kind of a catch-all for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, okay? I think it's really important to acknowledge that diabetes impacts different communities in very different ways. So even if we might talk about BIPOC communities as a whole, as part of the conversation, we're very aware that diabetes impacts Black communities and Indigenous communities and Latino communities and Asian communities, and et cetera, differently, okay? So I just want to sort of make sure that we're all kind of level set with that before we get going, because language is important, as we have all learned, very much so. All right, so with all that stuff being said, Mona, your turn. Please let everybody watching know, what do you do? Tell us about your role at Providence.
So yes, I am a certified diabetes educator here at Providence Holy Cross. So I see inpatient, outpatient, ER patients, newly diagnosed, somebody that's had diabetes 20, 30 years, provide them with education, the tools that they need to be successful in managing their diabetes. And we also do a lot of education with our staff, with our nurse practitioners, our physicians, our bedside nursing. So it's really fun. I get to do a lot of different types of education, which I enjoy. And hopefully, before COVID, we had a support group that I led, and I'm hoping we did it virtual. We weren't too successful. So I'm hoping soon that we can resume that.
Yeah, man, we're getting so close, right, to some of those in-person things coming back.
Yes.
I actually traveled yesterday to my very first speaking engagement pre-COVID, or since pre-COVID, although it was kind of odd. I was in this big room and I had to speak with a mask on without a microphone. It was really, really tough. Okay. I digress. But yes, hopefully that group is coming back for you soon. Yeah. A very fundamental question, Mona, that I think so many people have, and that gets misunderstood so often, is kind of maybe simple and not so simple. What is the difference between type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes?
So I usually break it down by type 1. It's an autoimmune disorder. So something happens in the body that is attacking the beta cells, which are located in our pancreas. Something is causing it to break down, and that's the cells that actually make insulin. So their body no longer can make insulin. They have to be managed with only injections, no oral medications. And a lot of patients will ask me, oh, well, do I have the bad one or not? And it's not really that one's worse than the other. It's just different management. And we have to get lab tests to confirm you are truly a type 1. So there is some genetic tendency for type 1, but what we've, research has showed us is there's a genetic tendency, but we don't know. Something in the environment triggers that gene to activate and the beta cells are gone. Mm-hmm. Type 2, there is a genetic component. There is, you have family history, but what I like to tell my patients is we can't control our genes, but we can control how we wear them. Okay, so
yeah. I love that. Did everybody hear that? I want you to say that one more time, Mona. That was great.
So we cannot control our genes, but we can control how we wear them.
Love it.
So I can identify myself as a person of color. I have diabetes on both sides of my both parents. So I try to do my best, try to eat right, and try to be active to hopefully, if I do get it, get diabetes, it's going to be when I'm 70 or 80, not now.
Mm.
So we can definitely, make lifestyle changes to hopefully not have it come, but we can't control our genes all the time, and if it does happen, and I'm sure it is, I'm going to do my best to manage it.
Well, and what are some of those things? I think people get so scared right away. They hear diabetes, and type 2, right? So it's something that develops, but that's something that we can, like you were saying, sort of stave off, even if it's in our genetic kind of makeup and in our family history.
Yeah.
What are some of those factors that people can do to maybe avoid developing type 2 diabetes?
I usually tell patients, honestly, having diabetes or pre-diabetes or no diabetes, it's really about living a healthy lifestyle. Bottom line is we all got to move more and eat less.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, you go out to eat, it's bigger portions. Family events, especially our cultures, is very linked to food is love. Eat more, let me feed you more. So really the bottom line is, if I get a patient that doesn't exercise at all, I just ask them, I said, give me 10 minutes, 3 times a week. That's all I'm asking for. Work on that for 6 weeks, and then maybe we'll bump it up to 15, minutes. And really just watching our portions and making little changes. January's coming up, so I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of patients that are like, I did boot camp, I did this, and I did that, and they can't sustain it. So I always try to see where a patient is at. Look at where you're at right now and look at a small change you can make, because that is what's going to last you and be consistent and last you longer than these drastic changes that we can't maintain.
You are so onto something right there, Mona. And I counsel this. You and I kind of see diabetes in 2 different scenarios, because I'm an acute care nurse practitioner. So I see people in the hospital who are really sick, sometimes DKA or HHNK. They're in the ICU, they're on an insulin drip, regardless of type of diabetes, but it's out of control, right? Usually once we get those patients stabilized and they're getting ready to go home, I really like sitting down and having a nice long conversation about, sometimes diabetes can feel so big and it can feel so heavy, and they're like, I can never, I think the number one thing, you probably get this too, is people are saying, I can never have a cookie or a piece of cake ever again, right? I can never eat sugar ever again. When actually really it's carbs, and it's really the consistency of carbs and the quantity, like you said, portions, but also just understanding that those little things, and this is the point I'm really trying to drive home here with folks, those little things make a big difference. They are cumulative. They're like our 401ks, right?
Yeah.
When they always say, like, you put in $1,000 and then 30 years later you got $400,000, or I wish it worked that way, but you know what I mean? The same is with diabetes. And can you talk to a little bit about maybe some folks who are watching, particularly BIPOC folks, people of color?
Absolutely.
What are 2 or 3 of those nuggets, just those little things from a nutrition standpoint that we can make changes?
Sure, absolutely. And I always start with where a patient's at. You can't compare what you do to somebody else. So, for example, I had a patient the other day, came in, new onset diabetes, had no idea he had it. And I asked him, I said, oh, how many tortillas do you have each meal? Oh, 10. I said, okay. I said, are we willing to do maybe 5 or 6 a meal? And he looked at me and goes, yeah, I think I could do that. I said, okay, let's do that for a little bit. Another example is I have patients that drink 3 sodas a day. Like, it's just given breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I ask them, what do you think? Can you maybe do 1 or 2 a day? And if they, some tell me that there's no way. I said, okay, then let's talk about something else we can change.
Right.
And because we always have to have empathy too, because I wouldn't want someone to come tell me, don't do this, don't do that. And, we have to understand that patients don't want that either. And just like you touched on about, just making those little changes, and that's what's going to really add up and make that significant change and help you manage your diabetes best.
Yeah. You brought up the hospital where I work at primarily serves a Black and brown population. And so culture really does. And the way that culture, food is approached with culture.
Food is love.
Food is love. And you know, heaven forbid you go to Tia's house and she's made this whole thing for you and you say no, or abuelita, right? You will literally give abuelita a heart attack if you say no to eating this food. So how do we approach that, right? How do we approach, like, I'm at abuelita's house, she's made all of this food. I know I kind of have to eat it because of the relationship I might have with abuelita, but also, like, I know for my own health, I can't eat it like I used to.
Absolutely. And I tell them to work it in, and just how you said about the cookies. So, I would tell them what other carbohydrates can you eliminate or maybe fill up more on veggies and vegetables and protein. So that way you can have the cookie. But when you're going to family's house like that, I always tell the patients, look and see what is it you really want. Is Thea known for the tortillas or is she known for the beans? Pick which one is going to be like, okay, I'm not going to get this all the time. This is a special occasion. And I always tell them, if you mess up and you eat a lot and you tried your best, it's okay. Every meal you get a new chance to start over. And if you do eat a lot, I always tell them either go walk, put on the music, and everybody just start dancing. Just move your body, because any activity is going to help lower your blood sugar.
I love that. And I love I think there's so much guilt around this. Like, we're going, let's dig in a little bit here, Mona. There's a lot of guilt and shame around diabetes, and they type 2 diabetes and obesity generally go hand in hand. And there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of shame about that. And yet a lot of us, people of color, come from these communities where food is love, and food was sometimes the only thing we had to be able to gather around. And so you have food, but then that same food is what's causing us to be disproportionately sick.
Yes.
Can you talk to a little bit about how some, Black, Latino, Indigenous communities in particular are disproportionately impacted by diabetes?
I really feel, you said it was the diet too. And I also feel it's almost the health literacy. Like, they just don't know to call. Sometimes I'll see patients here and they tell me, oh, I've had high blood sugars the last 4 months. And I say, oh, well, why didn't you call the doctor? Oh, well, I have an appointment in 2 months, so I'll just wait. So I always try to teach that, your health is important. You need to step up and call. And I find with, the BIPOC community is they really feel like, oh, I can't question the doctor. Or no, this is what he told me. So I can't say that my blood sugars are high, or that what he did didn't work. Or a lot of times they'll say, oh, I'm taking all my medication, or they tell the doctor that. And then I come in and I'm like, okay, honestly, I'm not here to judge. Just kind of tell me, what's happening. And they're like, oh, I only take it twice a week. And so when I explain to them, not to have that shame, that we're all here to really help them and to get them, get their glucose in range. And it's not about judgment, and it's not about shame. And I also, tell them a lot of patients tell me they feel like they're the only ones in the family that have it. And I explain to them, not many people announce when they have diabetes. I said, you might start to open that window, that can of worms, and say, hey, I just got diagnosed. And you might have 5 other family members that said, oh, you too. Oh, you too. And I really try to encourage them to, use it as a force to teach and to help others.
I absolutely love that. I think sometimes it's even harder for people of color to be vulnerable.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of time, like culturally, but then a lot of times there are people of color in different circumstances are already sort of at a disadvantage. And then to be vulnerable might show a sign of weakness.
Yes.
And so we're sort of taught, like, don't be vulnerable. Don't tell the family. You don't tell your friends that you have diabetes, because that's showing another sign of weakness.
100%.
But I loved what you said about, actually, if you do that, Thanksgiving's coming up, right? If you're the first person at the Thanksgiving table to be like, y'all, I went to Mona because Providence diagnosed me with diabetes 6 weeks ago, and it is real, and it is a struggle, and I could use your help, or I don't know what to eat on this Thanksgiving table, right? And then you said it, Mona. I think people would be so surprised. Probably half the rest of the table would be like, oh yeah, me too,
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, it's a really, really big thing. And that kind of leads me into my other question in terms of awareness and promoting health in underserved communities. So we kind of talked a little bit about in your own family unit. how you go about doing that. How do we do that sort of as we expand into communities in general about diabetes?
I'm hoping as things are opening up, we can get out there more. I really feel to help, the BIPOC communities, we have to go where they're at. If they're at church or if they're in the market, let's, try to hit it there, or really, just encourage, have that encouragement. So when I have a patient, I tell them, I said, you can help others, even if your family members are like, oh, I'm not doing that, and that's a stupid way to live or whatever. I said, you make those changes, you're planting seeds. They're going to watch you. Like I tell a lot of my patients, they have kids. I said, you know what? I said, they might fight you that you're not going to buy the juice anymore. I said, but eventually you're teaching them. You are teaching them. And because you have diabetes, they're more likely to get that also. So I really am try to empower patients to be that change. And I feel when others see it, hopefully we're planting seeds there that we can make some changes and hopefully have a much healthier community.
Yeah, I really agree. That's fantastic. Meeting people where they are, both, you said that so well, on a micro level, like in the individual conversation, right?
Yeah.
I've used that, almost that same example, Mona, multiple times. How many tortillas are you having with dinner or with each meal? Okay, let's just start there, right? Don't change anything else. But then also meeting a community where they are,
Yes.
both metaphorically
Yeah.
and physically, right? You can't, I think we learned this with the COVID vaccines. I know that's a different conversation, but we learned that with the COVID vaccines, there was kind of sort of slow uptake of COVID vaccines among particularly Latino and Black communities here in Los Angeles County. And then all of a sudden, when we went with the vaccine information from people who look like the community to the community, it changes everything, right?
Agree.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even I'm doing my job even at the market or somewhere, it's like, oh, someone is asking me something, and I just feel just like you said, when they see that I'm just like them and I'm speaking to you and giving you education. So I mean, even at schools, or I mean, wherever I'm at, I'm always trying to plant seeds somewhere.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit, because of that, tell me a little bit about how important language is, right? How that, some things get lost in translation a lot. And can you talk a little bit about like how, particularly obviously for our Spanish speaking population, how important it is to have those Spanish speaking people and resources?
I actually have a funny story. I used to work with an Australian nurse. I mean, blonde hair, blue eyes, Australian accent. She'd come and tell me, oh, this patient is taking their medicine, everything. And it's just something's not adding up. And I said, oh, okay, let me go see them. So I go in there, speak Spanish to them. The patient did know a little English and was able to communicate with her, but I went in there talking Spanish. Oh, I got the whole lowdown. No taking medication, eating large amounts of food at home. And I came back and I told her, I said, oh, well, this happened. She's like, oh my gosh. And then I knew it happened, but until I experienced it, I said, wow, that was significant. I mean, this man, the patient told her, I'm taking my medicine every day, and we were going to increase his insulin for home. And I said, let me go see. So it was, thankfully, I went in and I just started speaking Spanish, and he felt so comfortable that he told me I'm not taking it the way I should, and I know I need to be better. So then we talked and, was able to help him, but it definitely impacts. So definitely in my work, any Spanish patient, I'm like, I will take them. I will see them, because it's just, I feel a comfort. They just feel like they can just express the truth and not feel so nervous about, well, what are they going to say? And, it's just so much more comfort level for them.
Mm-hmm. You've hit on something there, Mona, that is very, very well researched, not only in diabetes education, but for all providers. And that is, people of color get better healthcare and are more receptive to the healthcare that they're getting from people who have their shared experience.
Yes.
Meaning Black folks get better care from Black folks because there's a better, kind of like you said, there's a more of a comfort level. There's more of a symbiotic relationship. I know you at least I can tell what you're going through. And so same thing, I think that you just said, an incredible experience. That nurse was probably doing everything right, and that patient was trying to communicate, but also maybe uncomfortable because they're like, this person doesn't maybe have my shared experience, at least on the surface level, and I'm going to feel judged if I open up, right?
Sure.
So what would you say to patients in a scenario like that, where maybe there is a language barrier or there's a cultural barrier or whatever, but in learning how to sort of advocate for themselves, especially like around a new diagnosis of diabetes?
I usually always tell them, your health matters. What you have to say matters. And I usually tell them, who's going to have complications, you or the doctor? Who's going to be in the hospital bed, you or the doctor? You got to
Oh, Mona, that's
so
great. Mona's giving us all of them. I love it. Say that again, Mona. That was great.
Just that their voice matters, their health matters, and who's going to have the complications, you or the doctor? And I tell them, I said, you don't speak up, no one's going to know. And I always tell them, I said, my goal as an educator is to live a healthy lifestyle and have no complications. How we're going to do that is you have to speak up. And it's okay. And I always tell them it's okay to speak up. And they just always look at me like, oh, I can't question the doctor. And I tell them, if they give you these prescriptions for these medications, you go home and you're checking your blood sugars, your numbers are still high. So then you need to call and say, I don't like my numbers high. And they look at me, I can do that. I said, absolutely, you can.
And we want you to, as someone who's a provider, right? Prescribing that medication, particularly in the hospital environment, right?
For sure.
We get people started and then I'm like, you have to follow up because what I'm sending you out on is probably not the combination that's going to ultimately work for you.
Exactly. And I tell them, I said, they're making these changes in the office, but you don't follow up. How do they know it's working or not? I said, so I always tell them they have to do their part. And they look at me like, really? It's like, yes, do your part. You got to follow up. And then I think too, also with our, with people of color, it's, you don't go to the doctor unless something's wrong. So, everything's fine. Oh yeah, my numbers are still high. It's okay, but I feel fine. I'm not going to call. I'm not going to make an appointment. And I'm like, no, you got to go, even if you feel okay.
It's rough. It's rough because it's a cultural thing,
Oh,
right?
100%.
And so even you saying in that, again, in that micro moment, in that one-to-one moment with a patient or a patient and family, saying you can speak up, and literally for folks that are watching that are maybe not familiar with these cultural nuances, you're just told whatever the doctor says is flawless, and
100%.
you just do it and that's it, and end of discussion. There's also a different sentiment around the approach to medications, and this happens in sort of both Black and Latino communities, that I took this medication, it made me better, so then I'm done. Like with blood pressure, right? I see it with blood pressure medications.
Oh, blood pressure, yes, 100%.
Isn't it something, right? I took my blood pressure medication, it brought my blood pressure down, so now I don't need to take my blood pressure medications anymore. And it might seem sort of funny to those of us who have these nursing and medicine backgrounds, but culturally, it's hard. It's hard to fight years of culture telling you, don't challenge this authority figure.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And so what, I like where you've gone, but I really want to enforce this one more time to folks that are watching. What's one thing, let's say you are a patient, you don't like your numbers, you're sitting in the nurse practitioner's office or the doctor's office. What's one thing they can say to just open the door to having a conversation about changing medication or something like that?
I usually tell them either bring your logbook, show your numbers, or bring your meter. Or you say, and I encourage them to take notes, like, oh, you notice the mornings are high or the evenings are high. I always, let them know, hey, open that door by saying, I've noticed my numbers are high in the morning, or I'm not feeling that great. And I've noticed my blood sugars, I can't get them below 200. And then, of course, the doctor will be concerned because we know we want you below 200. So, I kind of put it back on their hands and say, hey, you want to be healthy. You don't want complications. This is your part. The doctor has a part, the educator has a part, and the patient has a part. And some patients are like, oh, the doctor has to do it all. And I said, no, you have to do your part. You have to check your blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We really do have to work together. And I love that you brought up data, right? We're scientists as nurses and we love data. And if you're if you don't have a fancy little arm meter or you're not logging things or whatever, and we don't know whether your medication regimen is working except for like an A1C, right? Well, and even then we're like, all right, well, your A1C went from 8 to 9, so something's not working. But how we adjust that insulin regimen or pills and insulin or whatever can sometimes, it's really helpful if you have data. So for those of you watching, don't be afraid to write it down. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Look, you can put it on a Post-it note, you can do whatever, right? Just write it down. That data is super, super helpful. Listen, for everybody watching, we have about 4.5 minutes left. So YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're watching, if you have questions for Mona, questions about diabetes in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, Latino communities, put them in the chat here. We'll get to them real quick. You have a certified diabetes educator right here. So if you have questions, now's the time to answer them, okay? And while maybe some of those questions come in, Mona, let's say you're one of those pre-diabetic folks, right? You're like, A1C is 6.3. You just got it. And you're like, BMI is like 31. Yeah. Like a little high, but not crazy. What do you do? What do you do before you panic? What do you do?
I tell them, how do you feel? Take a deep breath, let's, and I really explain to them that what I'm telling them and teaching them is what everybody should do, whether you have diabetes or not. So I really encourage them to know their A1C, because I always tell them, you might be 6.2, you're still pre-diabetes, but next year you could be 6.3, or next 6 months you're going in the wrong direction. So I want them to be aware of that. And again, I just start where they're at. If they're having 10 tortillas, okay, let's see if we can cut back. What small changes can we make to sustain them and to hopefully build on those changes, and really just moving. And with pre-diabetes, you really, really got to move. And I always tell patients, you don't want to take medication, then get out there and move. You got to find something that you like and do. And I always say there's no medication that's going to take the place of activity. That's the bottom line. So I really
feel like, Mona, you should have a sign. You're giving us all these good gems, right? You're just a sign. Who's going to have the complications, you or the doctor? Nothing beats medication more than activity. Somebody you said, I don't know. You've got a bunch of them, Mona. I love it. This is great.
So many years of working in this field.
Absolutely. And I think there's no medication that takes place of activity, right? I love it. Mm-hmm. And I love how you brought up that the activity, again, I think people hear, oh my gosh, I'm pre-diabetic, or, I have some obesity, or they're together. And sometimes we only have 15 minutes with you at most. And so we're like, hey, your A1C is a little bit high. I'm going to hook you up with Mona. She's a diabetes educator, but it's really important that you lose a little bit of weight and exercise. Okay, thanks, bye. Oh yeah, and take these meds, right? Yeah. When people hear exercise, I think they hear, I have to join a CrossFit gym and go 6 times a week, right? 100%. And they're like, I could never do that. You want me to run a triathlon every day? Like, this is what people hear when we say exercise. So Mona, for the record, when you or me or any other provider are saying, we want you to get a little exercise, we want you to get a little activity, what does that mean?
Just moving. I tell patients, park farther away. And they actually did a study. If you did 10 minutes in the morning, 10 in the middle of the day, 10 in the evening, it's the same as doing it all together. So I tell them, I said, look for little spots, in your day. If you have kids and you're picking them up and you get there early, what do? You sit in your car. Go walk. If your doctor's running late, instead of sitting in the lobby, you can say, hey, I'm going to go for a walk. I'll check in 10 minutes. Go check in. Oh, they're still not ready for you. Go do another lap. I tell patients, keep tennis shoes in your car, because you never know when the opportunity might come up that you can actually go and be active. You did bring up a good point about CrossFit and boot camp. So when I see a patient, they're like, oh, I'm going to do boot camp and CrossFit. And I ask them, I said, well, what are you doing now? Oh, nothing. That's okay. Then let's start with walking. Just walking. And then if you have a bad knee, get resistance bands, get, some kind of light weights. You can easily do arm exercises, leg lifts. Anything. Just move your body. That's the key. And I always tell patients, you have to find something you like. If you don't like it, you're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So you have to find some kind of activity you enjoy doing, because if it becomes a chore, then you're not going to do it.
100%. You know, and if it's yoga or tennis or soccer or whatever or something, but moving. Ultimate goal of 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes, but you don't have to start there. You just have to start moving more than you are now.
Exactly.
Mona, you've dropped like 4 gems on us today with these little quotes. I love it. Before we go, because we have to wrap up here, do you have any last gems or any last words specifically to our Black, Indigenous, and Latino folks, Asian folks watching who might be struggling with diabetes or have someone in their family who are? What's your last words to the community?
I think my last words would be, don't be scared, speak up. Your health matters, and don't get discouraged. If that A1C is high, that's okay. You just take that information and you work on it and just make small changes.
I love it. It really can be that simple. Just make small changes, start moving a little more, remove a few tortillas per meal. You'll be good.
Yes.
You'll be good. We promise you. We're not lying to you with this, okay? We promise. Mona Garcia, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. This was so fun. I think, like I said, this was the first time I got to host with a fellow nurse, so this was great. I really appreciate you joining us. And of course, everyone out there who has been watching, I went a minute over, but that's better than the 5 minutes that sometimes I go over. We really appreciate you listening and watching this, spending a little time with us today on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, wherever you're watching. And of course, if you're looking for help with your diabetes, your mental health, any other medical advice, please, of course, visit providence.org. We're going to hook you up. And be sure to follow Providence all over social media at Providence on Twitter and under Providence Health System on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. All right. Thank you all for watching. Hope everyone has a fantastic Wednesday.
Thank you.